I'll introduce. How do you want me to introduce?
However you want to feature, I don't know, whatever.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start the sacred rounds of the mic. We're going to start with our feature performer, Mr. Geoffrey, who showed up last week and wowed everybody. Yeah, it's going to do a half an hour. Let's all hear it for Geoffrey.
Good evening. I'm going to be doing something maybe a little different. I'm doing a show I'm putting together for next year over at the Shelton Theater. It's going to be a theater piece, and it's my tribute to San Francisco and kind of the cultural history of San Francisco mainly, and some of the other history. And so tonight I'm going to do a portion of it, some excerpts. And so the first monologue, which is something I wrote, it's kind of my take on the history of San Francisco and cultural history again, and then a little episode of my life, leading to a piece by Jack Kerouac about the night or the Sixth Gallery poetry reading, where Allen Ginsberg, read Howell, and many other poets you'll hear about read. It kind of started the beat scene, so to speak.
Yeah, just behind the spaghetti factory there in North Beach, right?
Well, actually, it was in the marina, the Sixth Gallery.
The Sixth Gallery.
Yeah. And then after that is a piece by a local writer named Gary Camilla, who writes for the San Francisco Chronicle as a column about San Francisco. And he also is the manager and editor of San Francisco Magazine. And he wrote this great book called Cool Gray City of Love about San Francisco. It came out about 3 years ago, and he's allowing me to use excerpts from it. So I'll be talking about a little ancient history of the day. And then the ending piece will be a piece by Mark Twain about his observations when he lived here. And we're going to start off with a little song, which is the title song. And the first song of the first line is the title of the show. I don't have a pitch pipe, so I hope I get it in the right place. Bear with me. I'm always drunk in San Francisco. I always stay out of my mind. But if you've been to San Francisco, they say that things like this go on all the time. It never happens nowhere else. Maybe it's the air. Can't ever seem to help myself. And once more, I don't care. I'm always drunk in San Francisco. I'm never feeling any pain. But tell me, why does San Francisco, just like a lover's kiss, go straight to my brain? I guess it's just the mood I'm in that acts like alcohol. Because I'm drunk in San Francisco, you better believe I stay stoned in San Francisco. I'm always drunk in San Francisco, and I don't drink at all.
All right.
Thank you. I'm in San Francisco. I just love it here. The beauty, of course, and the weather, the food, the giants, the history. Well, think about it. It's amazing. How many cities are known for eras, not decades? Well, in the beginning, there were, of course, the 49ers who brought the whole world here to the famous or infamous Barbary Coast. Well, San Francisco was the unofficial capital of the Wild West. Yeehaw! next, it was unfortunately known for the worst disaster ever to happen to a major world city, the earthquake and fire of 1906. Then during Prohibition, the wettest city in the West. And the noir years of the 20s and 30s made famous by Dashiell Hammett. And later, the Fillmore District. It's the Harlem of the West, with a renaissance of jazz that changed music forever. And then World War II, jumping off point to the Pacific. As a young soldier hanging out in San Francisco, this might have been their last taste of freedom and crazy fun before being shipped to the Pacific hell. Some of them never to return to San Francisco for their trip home. Well, the 50s brought the beats with Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, Michael McClure, Gary Snyder, so many other great poets, writers, painters, sculptors. It was another Renaissance wave, that's for sure.
Just walk past them.
Followed by one of the most important decades in history. The 60s! With the anti-war hippie movement and Summer of Love, introducing psychedelic music to the world, along with some of the greatest bands of all time, the Jefferson Airplane, and of course the legendary Grateful Dead. And one of the greatest singers I ever saw, the late great Janis Joplin. Well, those 2 decades alone changed world culture. Well, the 1970s kicked open the closet door to the Castro district with the large gay and lesbian communities, along with the music, disco, with Sylvester, and the thriving punk scene. You know, the rebellious children, the beats and hippies. Well, it was a life-changing time for me. I was co-producing punk rock shows at the Temple Beautiful, 1839 Geary Boulevard, smack dab in the middle of the historic block. On one side was the legendary Fillmore Auditorium, and on the other, the People's Temple. The late 70s, early 80s brought a dark fame to the city. People's Temple, suicides, the murders, Harvey Milk, Mayor George Moscone, and worst of all, the AIDS epidemic. Well, the 90s and thousands finds it as the capital of world technology. Well, it's changed the city in so many ways. In a San Francisco cultural sense, it's made it a lot harder to be a starving artist or arts organization or, hell, a low-income resident to survive in the city. Low-cost spaces to live, create, and perform are disappearing. Right, Frank? Along with the artists. Well, my connection with the cultural history of San Francisco was made mostly through the music of the late 60s. I was a deadhead before there was a term for it. When I was young, in the early 70s, I used to hang out at this little radio station in Los Gatos called KTAO, or KTAO, very 60s, early 70s. And I mostly hung out with this DJ who had the Saturday all-night shift, where he played mostly jazz. Sometimes I'd drop acid and just trip all night, you know, and once in a while he'd let me play one of the Dead's long improvised jams at 3 in the morning. He was, I don't know, about 20 years older than me, and he told me that he had been good friends with Neil Cassidy, you know, the infamous friend and inspiration for Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and, well, as I knew him as the bus driver, rapper, and speed freak with the merry pranksters who hung out with the Dead. Well, one day he asked me if I wanted to go with him to have dinner at Carolyn Cassidy's house, Neil's widow, who lived in town. I was like, really? Yeah, I'm there. I mean, she was married to Neil Cassidy and had a long-term relationship with Jack Kerouac and was a darn good writer herself. Well, I mean, it was just so cool, you know, just meeting her and then walking into this living museum where Neil, Jack, Alan, all their friends hung out over the years. Oh, she showed me some snapshots of Neil and her and some that she'd taken out the side in front of the house that had become kind of legendary. Neil and Jack with their arms around each other. And the actual original snapshot, I was like, wow. Well, I mean, she couldn't have been nicer, you know, I mean, making dinner for the two of us and telling all these interesting and some really humorous stories about everyone. It was an unbelievable night. Well, it was so long ago, it's almost like a dream now, but I'll never forget it. Where'd you meet Jack Kerouac? They asked him when we walked into the place. The favorite bar, the Hepcats around North Beach. Oh, I always meet my bodhisattvas in the street. Gary Snyder yelled, and then on the gears. It was a great night. A historic night in more ways than one. Well, he and some other poets were scheduled to give a poetry reading at the 6th Gallery in town, and they were all meeting in the bar and getting high. But as they stood and sat around, they saw that he was the only one that didn't look like a poet. Though poet he was indeed. Well, the other poets were either horn-rimmed intellectual hepcats with wild black hair like Allen Ginsberg, or delicate, pale, handsome poets like Michael McClure.
Oh, yeah.
In a suit. Or out of this world, genteel-looking Renaissance Italians like Philip La Mantia, who looks like a young priest. Or a bow-tied, wild-haired old anarchist fudge like Kenneth Rexroth. Or a big, fat, bespectacled quiet boo-boos like Philip Whalen. And all the other hopeful poets were standing around in various costumes, worn sleeve corduroy jackets, scuffly shoes. Like Gary Snyder was in rough Williamson's clothing, bought secondhand in Goodwill stores. He showed great sympathetic interest in me. He claimed at once that I was a great bodhisattva, meaning a great wise being or a great wise angel, and that I was ornamenting this world with my sincerity. Oh, Gary's buddy, the aforementioned big boo-boo. Big old good-hearted Philip Whalen. 180 pounds of poet meat. Who is he? I asked. Oh, it's my big best friend from up in Oregon. Well, at first you think he's slow and stupid, but well, actually he's a shining diamond. You'll see. Well, anyways, I followed the whole gang of howling poets to the reading at 6th Gallery that night, which was, among other important things, the night of the birth of the San Francisco Poetry Renaissance. I mean, everyone was there. It was a mad night. And I was the one that got things jumping by going around collecting dimes and quarters from the rather stiff audience standing around the gallery and coming back with 3 huge gallon jugs of California Burgundy. I'm getting them all piffed so that by 11 o'clock, when Allen Ginsberg was reading his poem Howl, drunk with arms outspread, everybody yelling, "Go, go, go, go!" like a jam session, and old Kenneth Rexroth, the father of the Frisco poetry scene, was wiping his tears in gladness. Oh, and Gary himself read his fine poems about Coyote, god of the North American Plateau Indians. "Fuck you!" sang Coyote and ran away. Read Gary to the distinguished audience, making them all howl with joy. It was so pure, you know, fuck being a dirty word that comes out clean. Oh, then Gary showed his sudden barroom humor with lines about Coyote bringing goodies, and his anarchistic ideas about how Americans don't know how to live, with lines about communities being trapped in living rooms that come from poor trees felled by chainsaws. His voice was deep, resonant, something earnest and strong, and humanly hopeful. I liked about him. Well, the other poets were either too dainty in their aestheticism, or too hysterically cynical to hope for anything, or too abstract, or, well, too political. Oh, meanwhile, scores of people stood around in the darkened gallery, straining to hear every word of the amazing poetry reading. As I wandered from group to group, facing them and facing away from the stage, urging them to grab a slug from the jug. Or wandered back and sat on the right side of the stage, giving out little wows and yeses of approval, and well, even whole sentences of comment with nobody's invitation, but Well, in the general gaiety, nobody's disapproval either. It was a great night. Delicate Philip Lamontia, read from delicate onion skin, which he kept flipping carefully with long white fingers, the poems of his dead chum, Hoffman, who had eaten too much peyote and chihuahua. But read none of his own poems. Charming elegy in itself to the memory of the dead young poet. And read them in a delicate Englishly voice that had me crying with inside laughter. Though later, I got to know Philip. I liked him. Among the people standing in the audience was Natalie Jackson, a girl with a short haircut, red-haired, bony, handsome, a real gone chick. And a friend of everybody of any consequence around North Beach. The writer herself was bubbling over with excitement at the time because she was in love with my old buddy Neil Cassidy. Great, hey, Natalie, I yelled, and she took a big slug from my jug and shined eyes at me. Neil just stood behind her with both arms around her waist. Between poets, Kenneth Rexroth would get up and make a little funny speech in his snide, funny voice and introduce the next reader. But, as I say, come 11:30, when all the poems were read and everyone was milling around wondering what had happened and what would come next in American poetry, he was wiping his eyes with his handkerchief. And we all got together with him. The poets drove in several cars to Chinatown for a big fabulous dinner off the Chinese menu. For chopsticks, yelling conversation in the middle of the night in one of those free-swinging, great Chinese restaurants of San Francisco. Well, this happened to be Gary's favorite Chinese restaurant, Sam Woe. He showed me how to order, how to eat with chopsticks, and told anecdotes about the Zen lunatics of the Orient. And we always so glad. And, we had a bottle of wine on the table. And, finally, I went over to an old cook in the doorway and asked him, "Why did Bodhidharma come from the West?" "I don't care," said the old cook. I told Gary, and he said, "Perfect answer. Absolutely perfect. Now you know what I mean by Zen." Human beings probably arrived in San Francisco around 13,000 years ago. But these earliest San Franciscans left no traces. The oldest skeleton found in the city is that of a female unearthed during excavation of the Civic Center BART station, 1969, dating to about 5,000 years ago. Now, much of the terrain was covered in scrub brush, although groves of live oak, California buckeye, and bay laurel trees grew in a rectangle running from the southern border halfway through central San Francisco. Huge sand dunes carried down from the Sierra by vast rivers, falling on the edge of the city, and the sand blew and filled up the western part of the city, blown by the wind. The strangeness of this landscape would have paled in comparison to the animals that inhabited it. Across the wide, grassy plain, now covered by the bay, roam vast herds of enormous beasts. Huge Colombian mammoths rumble along next to gigantic mastodons. Hundreds of giant bison, weighing 800 pounds, standing 8 feet tall, made their way across the Golden Gate. Tapirs, western camels, antelope, deer, elk, possibly moose, made their way across the plains. Ground sloths, the size of oxen, lurked in nearby forests. These grazing herd animals were stalked by the most terrifying mammalian killing machines ever to walk the earth. At the top of the food chain was the short-faced bear, standing 13 feet tall and weighing 1 ton. The short-faced bear was the largest and most powerful carnivore ever to live in North America, able to run an astonishing 40 miles an hour, up to a mile. And more rapacious than modern bears, an estimated 450 short-faced bears inhabited Bay Area. It was joined by saber-toothed cats, grizzly brown bears, dire wolves, and even jaguars, which existed as far north as San Francisco until the 1820s. If an animal was wounded, giant condors with 12-foot wingspan sailed overhead, waiting to pounce.
These new confounded things here, masses. Yes. San Francisco. Fascinating city to live in. It's handsome. At a fair distance. Well, close at hand, one notes that the architecture is mostly old-fashioned. Many streets are made up of decaying wooden houses. Even the kindly climate is sometimes pleasanter when read about than personally experienced. Nobody ever wears summer clothing. And you do not use overcoats, and you do not use fans. Well, it's as pleasant a climate as could well be contrived. The wind blows there a good deal in the summer months. And it has only snowed twice in 19 years in San Francisco, and then it only remained on the ground long enough to astonish the children. And along in the summer, when you suffered about 4 months of lustrous, pitiless sunshine, you were ready to go down on your knees and plead for rain, hail, snow, thunder, and lightning. Anything to break the monotony. You'll take an earthquake. And the chances are that you'll get that too. Well, for a few months I enjoyed what to me was an entirely new phase of existence. A butterfly idleness. Nothing to do, nobody to be responsible to, and untroubled with financial uneasiness. Well, I fell in love with the most cultured city in the world. San Francisco was paradise to me. I lived at the best hotel. I attended private parties in sumptuous evening dress, hoketed with a step, peculiar to myself, and the kangaroo. I kept the due state of a man worth $100,000, and likely to reach absolute affluence when that silver mine sale should be ultimately achieved in Nevada. But then, all of a sudden, out went the bottom, and everything went to ruin. My hoarded stocks were not worth the paper they were printed on. I had not now as much as $50. Well, I removed from the hotel to a very private boarding house. I took a reporter's berth, went to work. A month afterwards, I enjoyed my first earthquake. It was one which was long called a great earthquake of '65, and is doubtless so distinguished till this day. It was just after noon. I was coming down 3rd Street, and all was solitude and Sabbath stillness. But as I turned the corner, there was a great rattle and jar. It occurred to me that, here was an item, no doubt a fight in the house. But before I could turn to seek the door, there came a really terrific shock. The ground seemed to roll under me in waves, interrupted by violent joggling up and down. I fell up against the framed house, hurt my elbow. Well, I knew what it was now, and at that moment, a third, still severer shock came as I reeled about on the pavement, trying to keep my footing. I saw a sight. The entire front of a 4-story brick building on 3rd fell sprawling across the street. Every door of every house, as far as the eye could reach, was vomiting a stream of human beings. Gentlemen and ladies who were sick or taking a siesta thronged into the streets in all sorts of queer apparel, and some without any at all. A prominent editor flew down the stairs in the principal hotel with nothing on but one brief undergarment. Then a chambermaid exclaimed, "Where shall I go? Where shall I go?" She responded, "Well, if you have no choice, you might try a clothing store." A minister who was closing the services glanced up and said, "Keep your seats. There's no better place to die than this." And then added after the third shot, "But outside is good enough." He then skipped out the back door. Well, the earthquake episodes that formed the staple of San Francisco gossip would fill a book, so I will diverge from the subject. Well, after a 3 months absence in the Sandwich Islands, I found myself in San Francisco again without employment. And I tortured my brain for a saving scheme of some kind. And at last a public lecture occurred to me. I sat down and wrote one. I showed it to several friends, but they all said nobody would come to hear me and that I would make a humiliating failure of it. Well, I was disconsolate now. But then an editor told me, go ahead, take the largest house in town, charge $1 a ticket. Well, the audacity of the proposition was charming. It seemed fraught with practical worldly wisdom, however. The proprietor of several theaters endorsed the advice, said I might have the Academy of Music on Pine Street at half price, $50. Well, I took it on credit. I did $150 worth of advertising, and it was the most frightened creature on the Pacific coast. I could not sleep. Hey, who could? My lecture, which had seemed humorous to me at first, grew more and more dreary till not a vestige of fun seemed left. Well, I was so panic-stricken, I went to the wife of a popular citizen and said, "Well, this thing is going to be a failure. The jokes in it are so dim that nobody will ever see them." I would be glad if she and her husband would sit in the left-hand stage box where the whole house could see them. Well, I explained I should need help and would turn towards her and smile as a signal when I'd been delivered of an obscure joke, and then added, "Don't wait to respond." Well, she promised. And down the street I met a man. He'd been drinking, was beaming with smiles and good nature. He said, "My name is Tom Sawyer. You don't know me, I haven't got a cent, but if you knew how much I wanted to laugh, you'll give me a ticket." Well, is your laugh hung on a hair trigger? Can you get it off easy, I asked? Well, I gave him a ticket, appointed him to sit in the center and be responsible for that division of the house. Well, I ate nothing on the last day. I only suffered.
When do you want to?
I crept out of the theater at 4 in the afternoon, see if any sales had been made.
As I said.
The box office was locked up.
Go ahead and read that.
No sales. I might have noticed. I thought of suicide, pretended illness, flight. I thought of all these things in earnest, for I'm very miserable and scared.
Well, you decide.
But of course, I had to drive them away and prepare to meet my fate.
But if you want to.
I could not wait for 7:30. I wanted to face the horror and end it. The feeling of many a man doomed to hang, no doubt. Well, I entered the theater by the back door. The house is gloomy, silent, and depressing. Well, I went into the dark among the scenery, and for an hour and a half gave myself up to the horrors. Then I heard a murmur. Rose higher and higher and ended in a crash, mingled with cheers. Made my hair raise. It was so close to me and so loud. There was a pause. Then another. Before I well knew what I was about, I was standing in the middle of the stage staring at a sea of faces. bewildered by the fierce glare of the lights and quaking in every limb with a terror that seemed to take my life away. The house was full. Aisles and all. Well, the tumult in my heart and brain and legs continued for a full minute before I could gain any command over myself. But then I recognized the friendliness of the faces before me, and little by little my fright melted away, and I began to talk. Well, within 3 or 4 minutes I was comfortable. My chief allies all ready to make an onslaught upon the feeblest joke that might show its head, and whenever a joke did fall,